Okay, so wanted to talk today about Geula, but we will not begin with Egypt, we will not begin with Sinai, or even with the redemption itself. We will begin with trees. The language that everybody knows when people think about the holiday that is going to begin on Sunday night, right? Sunday night, we're going to begin the holiday of BiShvat, the new year of the trees. And the Pesach everybody likes to quote is Ki ha'adam eitz hasadeh, right? That the person is the tree of the field. And really, it's a key to understanding how life and Torah and Geula work. And if we don't truly understand what happens in Tu BiShvat, that we will not understand Pesach, and we will not understand Shavuot. And Tu BiShvat is not the introduction, it's the foundation of this whole process of how creation goes from its inception to its final goal. So, of course, Mishnah is the famous first Mishnah in Masechta Rosh HaShanah, and Mishnah calls Tu BiShvat Rosh HaShanah La'ilanot, the new year of the trees, and doesn't call it celebration of the trees, doesn't call it the day of the trees, it's calling it new year, Rosh HaShanah of the trees, right? So Rosh HaShanah always means a change of status. Like reality becomes different at that moment, even if nothing is yet visible to human eye, right? Like, for example, just a little over 3 weeks ago, somebody dropped an apple on Times Square, and we went from 25 to 26, and a whole lot of things change when you go from one year to another. Tax brackets change, 401k rules change, all kinds of things change, right? Just last time, the kid was a deductible on your tax return, and this year it is useless. Can't put him as a deductible anymore. He's too old, right? So what's changed from 1 second to another? It was 23.59.59, and it was 25, and then it became 0.000.001, right? And suddenly, so many things had changed, but really, the 2 seconds are no different from one another, right? But the status of so many things had changed, right? And that's really the core of the idea of what the term Rosh HaShanah means, right? Because we have more than one Rosh HaShanah in a year. The Mishnah there lists 4, and then in the comments you can find 2 more, but at the core, Rosh HaShanah means a change of status. Reality becomes different in that split second, in that moment, right? Even if nothing is yet visible to human eye. So in terms of Tu BiShvat, before Tu BiShvat, the fruit belongs to the previous year halachically, and after Tu BiShvat, it belongs to the new year. And that's important because that's going to practically affect your Meiser, your Truma, like all the things to do with the fruits, right? Which year it belongs to, when is the deadline to bring it, and so on and so forth, right? And so that's a fundamental principle of Torah. First, the status changes, and only afterwards, manifestation of that change follows. This is how Geula begins, right? So what actually happens to a tree on Tu BiShvat, right? And Tu BiShvat is going to be in a few days, and I'm sure it's going to be similar weather up where you are. Like, it's going to be really cold. They promise really low temps on Sunday and on Monday, promising to be like, especially for us here in the south, maybe people are used to it up north, but down south, for us, freezing temperatures on ice and snow, it's like all, out of normal. So what, so when you look at the tree right now, all the trees look completely lifeless, if not dead, right? There's not even a leaf on it. Forget about fruits and flowers and whatnot. They don't even have leaves, right? But, as I'll say, precisely at this time, the most critical process begins. The sap starts rising from the roots upward. Right? There are no blossoms yet, nothing is visible, but the process is already irreversible. And the Tu BiShvat is the day the growth has already begun, even when the entire world still looks like winter. So the Talmud says that there is no clearer sign of the end, meaning the end of days, than when the land of Israel gives forth its fruit. Yechezkel says in the Tanakh that he describes the mountains of Israel bearing fruit because people are soon to return. So notice something critical. What is the sign of redemption? Not a miracle. Growth, right? The fact that slow and steady growth of the vegetation had started, even though it's completely invisible right now, that is a sign of redemption, that it says, right? So when we look today at the state of Israel, right, and we see that from something that's been desolate for 2,000 years, suddenly the Jewish people came back to the land not so long ago, right, barely 60 years ago, and now I think in the past 60 years the Jews have managed to grow in the land of Israel more fruits than all the Goyim combined in the past 2,000 years prior to that moment. The Jews managed to grow insane, amazing fruits and stuff in the desert, in the Negev, on sand. They managed to be more productive than people that live in much better, areas in terms of agriculture, where they have wonderful soil and they have rivers and plenty of water and whatever, And then if you take this per square kilometer, whatever success ratio of how much you grow per that area, it's insane, right? So, and that is one of the signs of redemption, right? That's what Gemara says, that there is no clearer sign of the end of days than when the land of Israel gives forth its fruit. But, right, the growth is a slow process. Now, I'm sure everybody is familiar with a term in Hebrew, PaRDeS. PaRDeS means orchard in English, right? So why is it important? PaRDeS in our tradition is abbreviation of 4 words: Pshat, Remez, Drash, and Sod. Right? So Pshat is your physical, the direct, straight up level of understanding, and then Drash is your Remez is something that's a hint, and Drash is expansion of concepts and connection of them, and Sod is the mystical, secret ideas, right? And it's similar. It works similar in the holiday of Tu BiShvat, right? On the level of the holiday of Tu BiShvat, we can look at if we look at the Pshat level. If we look at the Pshat level, then what we see is it affects, like we said, the halacha, right? It affects what you do in terms of bringing the fruits, right? It affects which fruits belong to which year, and when do you do your meiser, what are your deadlines, right? That's a direct effect on your life on practical level. Then, if you look on a level of hint, of Remez, you have the idea that, like we said, a person is associated with a tree, right? And the idea is that the tree has roots, right? And these roots represent your connection to Yiddishkeit, your connection to your people, your connection to Torah, your connection to Hashem. And obviously, just like with the tree, the stronger the roots are, the higher are the chances that you you retain your Yiddishkeit in life, no matter what happens to you, because you have solid foundation, right? You have a munah, you have certain misoras that you took from your parents, from the school, from whoever, right? And then you have the idea that you have branches of the trees, and on the level of Remez, the branches of the trees is various actions and things that you do in life, and everything has a goal, right? At the end of the day, you have to produce some sort of fruits. The fruits have to be the impact that you make on the world around you, right? The things that you did as your part in making the world what Hashem designed it to be. So ultimately, right, we see that that's on the level of the Remez, right? There's the hints of how you're supposed to be as a human being. Now, let's get back to the tree, right? So imagine a tree right now in the middle of the winter. It's bare, has no leaves, it's cold, probably it's frozen, right? Everything looks lifeless, right? Nothing promising right now. You don't even know. Every year you look at that bare tree and you think, maybe this year nothing is going to grow out of it. Who knows, right? Sometimes that happens too, right? Sometimes the tree dies and nothing grows out of it. But in the winter, you look at the trees and they all look like that. But what happens invisible to the eye, right? We said the set begins to rise. The process is unfolding. Nothing blooming yet. Nothing changed externally. And but something is happening, right? And that's what Chazal understood, right? That there's a process that is slow, it's invisible to the eye, and it's really difficult for us as modern people because we are accustomed to visible results, especially now in the era of instant communication. People expect results in the next 5 seconds. You know, you text someone, and if the response didn't come within 15 seconds, you immediately start thinking, you know, what's happening? You know, he doesn't want to talk to me, he doesn't respect me, he doesn't care about my time, blah, blah, blah. You know, like we expect results right away. And when we don't see immediate fast results, right, that's very difficult for us to process. And I would reckon that it's even harder for the generation of our children who are completely grew up digital and instant communication. And, you know, so for them, it's probably even harder. But in reality, right, the tree there's certain flow, right? And teaches us completely different rhythm. The tree says most important work happens in silence, it happens in darkness, happens underground, inside the bark. And when the leaves bloom in spring, everyone will say, oh, there it's begun, you know, like, oh, suddenly trees become green and maybe little flowers show up and things, you know. Oh, wow, the spring came. Well, guess what? That spring did not came out of the vacuum. It didn't happen instantly in one split second. So all this brings us to a question that is no longer about the trees, but about history itself. Why does Geula begin this way, right? The Tu BiShvat is a holiday that precedes the holiday of Pesach. Obviously, it's not random that they go in this particular sequence. And like I said, Gemara said that there's no clearer sign of Geula, right, than when the land of Israel starts to give fruits, right? So we see from this that this slow process preparing the fruits to come out, right, is the foundation of the whole Geula process. So the process of steady growth, that is what begins and kicks off everything. So it's interesting that Rambam says in Geras Teiman, he says a very important idea. He says that there is one mistake that leads to a false messianic ideas is the expectation of instant change. People expect that in one day everything will change. And when that doesn't happen in one day, they become disappointed. Or worse yet, they begin to follow those who promise them quick solutions. And we had a few characters in the history that promised quick solutions. And we know how that worked out, right? But the real Geula, that works according to the laws of the tree. First you plant, then you water it, then you wait, and then for a long time nothing is visible. Only then, finally, at some point, something sprouts, something shows up. And then you have leaves, and then you have flowers, and then it takes even longer, and then you have fruit. So when the Rambam describes the coming of Mashiach, he says very simply, he says he will come and people will gradually realize that he is Mashiach. Because there's a whole list of things Mashiach has to do before we finally will say, yes, he is Mashiach. He has accomplished this, he did this, he changed this, right? It's a process. It's not an instant thing. So in other words, it's not an explosion, it's a gradual realization that the process is already underway. So today, when we see how the land of Israel really does give fruits after 2,000 years of desolation, right? Everybody, I'm sure, read the famous description from Mark Twain from his trip to Eretz Israel. And if you look at the Eretz Israel today, it's nothing like what he described. It's completely different. It's just like it says in the Gemara, the land of Israel is giving its fruit. So we finally see that the Chachamim, right, they knew what they were talking about when they said that this will be a sign, and you see how this sign coincides with this amazing thing that happened just 60 years ago, something unprecedented in the history of humanity. No nation had ever gotten their land back and rebuilt their country within a short span of time, and nothing like that ever happened. Now, right, so back to PaRDeS, right? So we have the idea of the physical application of the Tu BiShvat. We talked about the Remez. There's an interesting Drash. On the level of Drash, there's Yerushalmi, where Rav Hizkiah says in the name of Rav, he says, a person will give an account in the world to come for everything his eyes saw and he could have eaten but did not eat. So think about it for a second. A person will answer not only for eating what is forbidden, he will answer for not eating what is permitted. Usually we think, oh, you ate a piece of chazar. No, that's an avera. And it is, for sure. He talks about something completely different. He says, you had the opportunity to eat something permitted and you did not use that opportunity. You're going to be responsible for it. So what does he want from us? Should we become gluttonous and just, eat enormous amounts of food or something like that? What is he talking about? Obviously can't be that. So he says, there is no problem with experiencing pleasure from the things Hashem created for us. The Avera is not in experiencing pleasure. It's when you eat unconsciously. Like when you eat without any consideration for what you're actually doing and why should you be eating. Right? When you eat, let's say, a fruit and you don't recite a blessing, you're not only violating a technical law. Of course, there's a halacha before you eat. You have to say a bracha, then you can eat it. Obviously, meaning that if it's even a kosher food to start with, right? That's obvious. What he says is that if you did not eat something when you had an opportunity to, you're missing an opportunity to elevate the physical into spiritual. You could have taken that grape. You could have said, Borei Pri Ha'etz, eat it, enjoy it, and elevate it. And you passed that opportunity. So he says, for every opportunity like that you had and you missed, you're also going to be responsible. Right? So bracha is not like a tax we pay for the right to eat something. Bracha is a recognition of truth. It means we recognize that this fruit is a gift from Hashem, the world is a gift, and the ability to taste and to say, oh, this is yummy. That's also a gift. Hashem built us physiologically where we can actually eat something and enjoy its taste or smell, right? It's a big bracha when you can do that. Has v'shalom, a person loses his sense of taste, a sense of smell, like a lot of people during COVID said that they, it was very hard to eat when you couldn't taste the taste of the food. It's like the eating was completely messed up. Like you couldn't enjoy eating it. Like you eat a steak, but you don't feel that you eat a steak. And it's like, what's the difference between this, that, and the others? Like there's there's really no joy in it. And Hashem certainly did not intend for us not to enjoy the world He created for us. But the idea is that you enjoy it and you understand why it was done this way and what you can accomplish when you eat it. Right? So the BiShvat teaches us, eat the fruits, enjoy them, but do it consciously. Okay, and that's on the level of Drash. Now let's get a little bit into thought. So there's a very important idea of Arizal, who explains that Adam Arishon, what was his sin? Was Eitz Hadas, was eating the fruit of tree of knowledge. It was not so much of what he took, it was about when he took it. Because the tree of knowledge itself was not evil. Adam took the fruit before its time. Before its time was the problem. In other words, to use the mystical terminology, he took the light before he had the vessel that was capable of containing that life safely. Right? He tried to reach a level that he had not yet matured to. And since then, all of our history is the correction of this split between light and the vessel, between spiritual potential and the readiness to receive it. Sometimes it's a great thing, but you're not ready for it. And if you take something you're not ready for it, it's not going to work out well. Right? So all the history of exiles is a process of preparing the vessels needed to take the light of Geula so that the Geula actually happens and it works and it sticks. So Tu BiShvat is a point where each year we correct the course of history a little bit, and we begin anew, and we get another chance to get a step closer to Geula. Right? When we eat fruits consciously, when we recite the blessings, when we meditate on their spiritual meaning, we do what Adam could not do. Right? Adam failed to unite the light with the vessel, failed to unite the spiritual and the physical. And when we do it correctly, in a little way that we can, right, we unite the material and spiritual in the correct way, and we return the light to the vessel. Right? We basically, on Tu BiShvat, we are correcting what Adam messed up back in his time. So that's why the mystics of Tzfat, led by Arizal, right, establish a custom of conducting a Seder on Tu BiShvat. Right? There's not just Seder on Pesach. There's a special ceremony we do on Tu BiShvat, similar to Passover Seder, but also not exactly the same at the same time. Right? It also has the 4 cups, but it has a different menu, and the cups are also different. And I'm not getting into those details in today. That's a whole separate, lecture. Today my focus is on the connection of Tu BiShvat and Geula. Right? So it's not just a beautiful custom. It's a form of calculated tikkun, spiritual correction. And the fruits are eaten in a specific order. So usually what you do is you eat something like nuts and pomegranates first. And those are the fruits that have the inedible outside. And then they have inedible parts inside. And the edible part is in between those parts. Like if you think about pomegranate, the shell you can't eat. And then there's the thing between the little fruits that you can eat, and then the little fruits have seeds inside them that you can't eat, right? So there's like 3/4 of that thing is inedible, maybe 1/4 is edible. Same thing with nuts. You have the hard shell, and then in between the thing, you also have inedible parts, right? So you have hard to get to it, right? This is what we call the world of Asiya, the world we're in, where the godliness is so hidden and so hard. The kedusha is so hard to get to in this world, right? It's so surrounded and hidden away from us. You have to break the shell and move this and that and the other before we get to something good in this world. And then the next type of fruits we take is usually the fruits that have either inedible outside but edible inside, or they're edible on the outside and they have a pit that you can't eat, which we associate with the world of Yitzira, where you already have formation of concepts of two extremes on opposite sides. And then we have the fruits that are fully edible, like figs, for example, right, or grapes nowadays, right? That's what we associate with the world of Bria, which is really a holy and lofty level, but that's where the concepts, theoretical concepts, appear, right? Of possibility of good and evil. Whereas there's no good and evil in Bria per se, but the concepts and ideas of it already formed there. And then we say there's the level that the world we call the Tzilus, and that's closeness to Hashem, at level where it's pure godliness. There's not even a concept of evil that exists there. And we say for that, we don't have a fruit like that in this world. But Chazal teaches something interesting. They said there's something close enough to the fruits of the world of Atzilus. What is it? They say apparently when Adam HaRishon spiritually fell from his high initial standing, all his five senses were affected except for one. What is that? That is the sense of smell. Right? The sense of smell is something that was unadulterated, did not get affected. Which is why, by the way, we see that in our tradition, for example, in Beis HaMikdash, the most holy and sophisticated and prestigious service is Ketoros, right? Which is associated with a sense of smell. To get a privilege as a Kohen to do the Ketoros, the daily, obviously, at Yom Kippur you have to be Kohen Gadol, but on a daily basis, right? They had a whole special lottery, and if you're a Kohen, you only probably got to do it once in your life. If you already ever got to do it, you wouldn't be in the lottery next time because there's too many Kohanim, too little days, right? And everybody wants to do Ketoros because it's such a holy, the Kohen Gadol taking the Ketoros and walking into Kadosh HaKadoshim and everything was filling with that aroma, that was the apogee of the whole thing. So Ketoros, so the sense of smell is very special. And it is very special because it was not affected by the spiritual contamination that happened at the time of inappropriate eating of Eitz Hadas. So what can we do on the two BiShvat Seder that is associated with world of Atzilus? We can use our sense of smell. So if you're lucky enough where you can find an estrog, they say that you can use your sense of smell, and on the Seder you can smell the estrog, because estrog, the smell of estrog is like the smell of Gan Eden. And by the way, also in the Gemara, the four fruits that they say could be the fruit of Eitz Hadas, one of them is estrog, right? And estrog is probably the highest of them all. And in general, estrog is a topic in and of itself, right? So you could use the sense of smell with estrog, and that would be the association with the world of Atzilus. Now, after everything we said about Tu B'Shvat, right, let's continue on to Pesach. And we should be able to see it in the new way now. Pesach happens several weeks after Tu B'Shvat. And Pesach is when the spring is already in full swing, right? So the things that began to grow on Tu B'Shvat, on Pesach, they finally come out, right? The tree on Tu B'Shvat that began the movement of sap inside the trunk, now on Pesach, finally that tree blossoms. And it's exactly the same way as the people of Israel who grew in darkness for centuries, in darkness of Galut, right? Yeah, we are like that seed in the earth. We're under, you can see it. People look at the Jewish people throughout entire history, and it looks like the Jewish people are completely being defeated and they're down, and there's no future for them, right? But in reality, the process of Geula already started, and it's just taking its time, right? The sap has to go up the tree and up to the branches, and then to cause the leaves to come out. All of that takes time. So Pesach is the moment when what grew in hiddenness becomes finally manifest. But, and this is critically important, without Tu B'Shvat, Pesach would be something that would not be stable, that produces a result that can last. Right? You can have, if the Exodus had happened without long preparation, without hidden growth and preparation, it would have been a miracle without continuation. Right? It would just be a flash in the darkness and back to darkness. So precisely because there was a long process of slow process of maturing through the exile of Egypt, that's why the Exodus could be successful and the Jews were not returned back to Egypt as slaves. Because it takes time, right? They went through a long period of time in the, when they were building those pyramids for decades, and everybody looked at them and looked at Mitzrayim, and it seemed like it's never going to happen. That whole prophecy of Geula, whatever, it's impossible. And the Jewish people, I'm sure, the last 1,000 years, 2,000 years of Galus, a lot of times looked around and were like, it's just not possible. But in reality, what was happening, right, this slow process was unfolding. Because, like, for example, if we read in the book of Shemot, when Hashem calls Moshe Rabbeinu and says, you're going to go and take my people out. Imagine, at that point, Pharaoh has no idea what's coming. Even the Jewish people in Mitzrayim have no clue what's coming. All they know right now is they have a 16 to 18-hour work days, basically working in concentration camps of Egypt, building the pyramids or whatever they were doing. And it seems like it's a super empire that lasted millennia and nobody can shake it and nothing can change it. But guess what? It already all happened. They just don't know it yet. Right? Hashem already laid all the plans. Everything is planned. He already told Moshe, oh, we're going to have this Makkah, and then we're going to have this Makkah, and this Makkah, and this Makkah, and finally we're going to have the Makot Bekarot, right? The plague of the firstborn, and then they're going to let you go. At this moment, Pharaoh has no clue. It's already a done deal. He still thinks he is untouchable. He is in his, pyramid, his bunker, wherever he is, enjoying life, thinking that he's almost like God on earth. And in reality, Hashem already planned how his whole empire is going to come crumbling down, and how 2 million people, 3 million people will leave Egypt, which was famous for the fact that in the whole history of Egypt, not one slave was able to escape it. And here's the whole nation is going to go out. But it didn't look that way until it happened. Right? So it's the same thing here. You have Tu B'Shvat, the slow and steady preparation for the Geula. And then finally, when Geula happens, when Pesach happens, right, then everybody says, oh, okay, now we get it. Now we understand. Now I see the leaves, I see the flowers, I see the fruits. Now it makes sense. And then what happens after that? Shavuot, right? 7 weeks after Pesach, on the 50th day, we have Shavuot, right? Just like there are 50, we say there are Nun Sharei Bina, there are 50 gates of understanding that Hashem created in this world of how the universe, how the creation is, right? On the 50th day happens Shavuot, and Shavuot exists completely beyond the boundaries of history. At Har Sinai, something happens that cannot be described in ordinary categories of time and space. Right? People at the time of revelation at Har Sinai were on the level of prophecy equivalent, to big prophets. Like they had direct perception of divine reality, right? The barrier between spiritual and physical was transparent for a moment. And what did people receive? Torah, right? So Torah is not just a set of laws. Torah is a blueprint of reality, and it's something that generates the whole reality and constantly supports it. Right? So when we do a mitzvah, right, we're not just carrying out an order. What we do is we actually align physical reality and spiritual reality. Right? So it's like the key and the lock, right? If you take the right key and you put it the right way in the lock, then they click and then the lock opens. But imagine if you take the key and you try to stick it into the lock this way. It's not going to work. Right? So normally, spiritual reality and physical reality are not aligned. And that's why things don't click. But when you do a mitzvah, what you do is you actually take two pieces of Lego and connect them to each other, right? And everybody does their little thing, and they would build this overall structure. So on Shavuot, right, we got the methodology and technology to make that happen. It says in Pirkei Avos, if there is no Torah, there is no derech eretz, which we normally translate like, without the Torah values, there's no proper conduct in the world, which is 100% true. But I can also understand it literally. If there is no Torah, there is no world. Like Hashem created the world so that there would be people in this world that would keep the Torah. Right? So if there is no Torah, there's no point for the world to be. The Torah is really the true reality. And every time you do what Hashem wants you to do, you align this world with the reality of Torah, right? And things come together the way they're supposed to come together. So what I want to conclude with is that Tu BiShvat teaches us to believe in the idea of hidden growth, right? To believe that even when it seems nothing is happening, work is going on the inside. Sap is rising from the roots, a seed sprouts in the darkness, and then comes Pesach, and it teaches us to go out of our limitations, right? To be ready for the moment when what was growing for so long inside finally can break through. Because psychologically, we're all terrified of change, right? And Pesach is a major change, right? People in Egypt were like already, well, the life is horrible, but at least we know it, we understand it, we know what to expect tomorrow, we know what to expect day after tomorrow. Like we're used to this, as bad as it may be. I remember myself, like growing up in the Egypt of sorts, in Soviet Union. It was just another Egypt, But you're used to it, you know it, you know how to navigate it, whatever. Like that's all you know. So to go out of what you know to a completely different country, to immigrate, to change your whole life, to learn a new language, whatever, that's scary. We're afraid of change. But you know what? The ability to leave that country and come to the United States was one of the biggest brachas Hashem ever gave me. And I'm glad I, went out of my boundaries, and the fear of learning another language or understanding a different culture or whatever, integrating into it did not stop me. And I didn't stay behind in Russia. I would not want to be in Russia right now. And I'm very happy that I'm in the United States. And I'm very grateful to the United States for everything it has given me. But the change is so scary, right? So the Pesach says you have to have the strength and the courage to break out of your limitations and sometimes make a drastic change in your life. So don't fear the change, right? Don't cling to familiar slavery just because it's predictable. And then Shavuot teaches us to live in this godly light and godly reality, right? To accept responsibility for the world as a free person, and to know that Hashem gave me the Torah, and it's not a limitation on me. Do this, don't do this. This is allowed. This is forbidden. Those are all technical tools of how to accomplish a goal. It's really that what gives me the freedom to impact the reality around me, to make this world transparent so that Hashem's light can shine through it. So this is one reality that gradually unfolds, right? We have this is our garden of redemption. First we have roots, and then there's trunk, and then there's blossoming, and then at the end you have the fruit. Right? But the fruit has the seed, and it will give beginning to a new cycle of another, tree. And this is how history works, and that's how our neshama works, and this is how Geula works, right? So when we understand this, we can look at time with all its chaos and with all the crisis and with all its uncertainty. We can look at time and we can see not the end, but we can see the beginning. Like we can look at the world around us, and it looks like scary things are happening in the world. But we should understand that while we have no clue, Hashem's already talking to Moshe Rabbeinu. He's already laying out all the plans of how he's gonna take us to from Mitzrayim to Eretz Yisrael. Like it's invisible to us right now, but the beginnings are slow. They take time. They go through a certain process, but the process is happening, right? So we live in BiShvat history right now. The sap is already rising from the roots. Most people don't see it yet, right? But those who understand the language of the trees know that spring is already on its way. So I want to say shalom to you, and I want to wish that we're all married to see the full blossoming of redemption in our days. And I want to say happy to BiShvat and make it count and make it meaningful.